have to talk about the struggle of black people, not only in the United States, but in the world. They're getting ready. They're getting ready. They're getting ready. They're getting ready to commit genocide against us.
Good evening and welcome to the show. We are now 30 days after the election and America is still reeling. Most are still pointing the finger at the Democrats and their failures and ignoring the fact that this is the direction that corporate power wanted to go in. The United States is a superpower in decline. The oligarchs are trying to stay on top of a declining empire, thus bringing in a fascist regime. We looked at how Trump won this election. Now what do? How can African Americans protect themselves, and why should we be concerned about doing so? Today, my guest is Mr. Walter Vincent Brooks, author of the book Trust No Shadows After Dark, African American Genocide in the United States of America. He will answer this question for you: why African Americans should be concerned about the Trump presidency. And with that, Mr. Walter Vincent Brooks.
Thank you so much, Carlos. You and I have been doing these types of programs for quite a few years now, and it never gets old. And I've really been grateful that all these years you and I have shared in a mutual kind of vision about America and how things are working. But this is going to be the first time. My book was published in October of 2021, so it's over 3 years out. But this is really going to be the first time that I'm going to take readers through it with a number of excerpts, because if we're going to really make sense out of what happened on November 5th, this literal, to me, a flipping of a switch that has thrown America into an extremely regressive and dangerous state of mind, with an individual, Donald Trump, who has now, it would seem miraculously, taken control of the American government. And I don't just mean as president of the United States. He is coming to power on January 21st with a 5-4 guaranteed Trump-appointed majority on the United States Supreme Court. Congress, both houses of Congress, the margins are narrow, but right now, both houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, Republicans who are completely under the thumb of Donald Trump are in charge. And he, unlike 2016, he is bringing in an absolute core of dedicated Donald Trump followers, like-minded followers, who have told us through the election, and now they're getting ready to show us that they're going to completely flip the United States government and political superstructure inside out. For Black people, This is more than a wake-up call. This is the greatest challenge of our lifetimes. Those of us, I'm in my 70s, Carlos is in his 70s. This ain't just about us old folks not being able to relate to the modern times. This is a situation in which those of us who have been alive and particularly been concerned about the community as activists for the last 50, 60 years, we are now in the sad position of being able to say we saw this coming because we have clocked our efforts to bring truth and justice to the African American people. And I'm here to talk about the African American people. This election showed, among other things, that this traditional idea of a mass, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-class affiliation and unity did not succeed. It did not succeed on November 5th, and that's one of possibly, aside from losing, Kamala Harris losing the election in and of itself, is one of the most disappointing things, is to find out how many people that we had assumed were dedicated followers of the Democratic Party turned. We're talking 20% of the black vote going to Donald Trump, something that 15 years ago would have seemed unimaginable. The Asian population, a great shift, and I shouldn't really say it's a shift, but to our awakening, a great shift in the Latino affiliation out of the Democratic Party into the Republicans. And that has come as a shock, but only to those that haven't been following what's been going on with the Latino people. So domestically speaking, a lot of the people that we have counted on and believed that we are the world, we are one, they have turned away from the Democratic Party. And then you look at the fact, here's one simple, just one of the amazing things. Donald Trump won New York City by something like 27,000 votes. Now there's millions and millions of people in New York City. Donald Trump won by 28,000 votes, which is extraordinary because most of us would have thought that New York City would not have went for Donald Trump. But what's more important is 500,000 registered Democrats in New York City didn't vote at all. Did not vote at all. They didn't vote for Trump. They didn't vote for Harris. This is even more concerning because I can understand an individual saying, you know, I don't really like either one of them. Okay, that's fair. This is America. But what about thinking about the damage that this man was going to do when if he was to achieve power again? What about all the people that are now going to suffer because Donald Trump is about to take over with an ugly stick? A lot of people in America, as we used to say as kids, are about to be whipped with an ugly stick. And so these are the kinds of things that my book, as I'm about to show you, really have been addressing from a historical arc. So without further ado, I want to get into this because it's not simply Trust No Shadows After Dark, which I made my title because I want people to realize we have to rethink everything. If November 5th didn't do anything else for us, it has shown us as African American people, descendants of slaves. I am not talking about a broad-based, I'm African American, a descendant of slave, and here's the Nigerians and the West Indians and all these other people. We need to come back and look at what we have been in America, both in terms of its negativity, slavery, and the sufferings that we have endured for 400 years and counting, but also the whole representation of what democracy and everything was. Because isn't it interesting that this election was the multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-class side were the ones saying we're fighting for democracy. These other people, Donald Trump and all his side, they're going to tear democracy down. When the fact of the matter is, African Americans, as much as we wanted Kamala Harris to win and for that to be true, we still are struggling to have our real representation amongst the masses of our people for democracy. So why did I subtitle my book African American Genocide in the United States of America? Here's why. And Carlos, I want you to count me down, like, maybe every 10 minutes.
Okay. Sure.
So I can keep up. Because what I did in my book was I went and did my own data capture, research, my own historical investigation of what has happened to the African American people since slavery, coming all the way forward up to 2020, because I was going into publication past 2020, okay? And with special emphasis on the last 60 years since the Civil Rights Movement. Because if the Civil Rights Movement was so successful as we keep trying to cheer ourselves up and believe it was, okay, why are we in such a state of misery? Now, I'm going to start, my book starts with a simple one-line quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. And here's the quote. In the final analysis, racism is evil because its ultimate logic is genocide. Dr. King made a speech called The Other America about 11 months before his assassination. And in this speech, for the first time, he publicly related what was happening to the African American people to the Nazi destruction of the European Jews. He pulled that trigger. He opened that door. This is how Dr. King's mind and his focus and his understanding of what was really taking place in America had changed by 1967, by the summer of 1967. Now I'm going to read you the actual full statement. In the final analysis, racism is evil because its ultimate logic is genocide. Hitler was a sick and tragic man who carried racism to its logical conclusion. And he ended up leading a nation to the point of killing about 6 million Jews. This is the tragedy of racism because its ultimate logic is genocide. If one says that I am not good enough to live next door to him, if one says that I am not good enough to eat at a lunch counter with him, or to have a good, decent job, or to go to school with him merely because of the color of my skin, he is saying consciously or unconsciously that I do not deserve to exist. This is such a profoundly important statement made by Dr. Martin Luther King in the last 11 months of his life. He had elevated all of the conditional negative factors of Black life: residential segregation, employment segregation, education segregation, all of our roster of discriminations. He had elevated his understanding of that to say, if you're not going to make it possible for us to have access and opportunities to these life-giving conditions of a decent job, a decent place to live, a decent community, decent economic development, decent education. If you're not going to make that possible, you don't even want us here. So the idea of genocide now, even to Dr. Martin Luther King, made a lot more sense. He was starting to look in the right direction. Now, here's the thing. I wrote this book with a platform. And my platform was, suppose everything that's happening to the African American people, all these shifts and twists and turns that we've been going through over since the civil rights movement came of age in the 1950s, everything that has happened from the 1950s to November 5th, 2024, suppose all of that was by design to put us in a place where we could be much more readily and easily destroyed as a people inside the United States of America. And the man that helped me the most develop that platform is the late, great Dr. Raul Hilberg, who wrote a book called The Destruction of the European Jews, published in 1961, and I read it in 1975. And he put together, how did the Nazis take the Jewish people, one of the world's most culturally cohesive, smartest, economically developed people, educated people, how did they get manipulated into a situation where they were so unprotected and helpless that they couldn't prevent the extermination, the slaughter of 6 million of their own people? 1/3 of all the Jews in the world died under Nazi Germany. And here's something that Dr. Hilberg, here is a quote from his book, and I want you to hear what he has to say about the word integration. In the last analysis, total integration requires complete acceptance. I'm going to read it again. In the last analysis, total integration requires complete acceptance. So long as acceptance is withheld from a group of people, those people will live more or less peacefully in a state of equilibrium between ultimate incorporation and final annihilation. We have been pursuing integration in the American social order since the 1950s, technically since we were brought here as slaves, but it took 250 years to get us out of slavery. And from 1865 to 2025, November 5th, to be exact, we have been struggling to be integrated fully into the American social fabric, to finally reach a state where being black doesn't make a difference. As the late, great Bob Marley says in his song, until the color of a man's eyes is no more relevant, until the color of a man's skin is no more relevant than the color of his eyes, there's going to be war. What a great line. That's what we've been pursuing. Can we ever get America to the point that our skin color no longer is this unbreakable line of division in this country? And on November 5th, the jury finally came back, and the answer is no. It's not ever going to happen in America. Before, even under Biden, What did we get? Biden came in with a commitment to preserve and renew the Civil Rights Act that millions and millions of voting black people needed to be sure that they weren't cheated out of their vote or they weren't gerrymandered out of relevance, that our numbers could actually mean something because we could vote in blocks in our states and counties where our numbers actually could add up to getting somebody black elected, to getting some things changed. He failed to do that. But he was nice. He gave us Juneteenth. He gave us Juneteenth as a consolation prize.
2 minutes left, Walter.
And Juneteenth, as we can see, it didn't do a thing on November 5th, 2024. It didn't help us at all. This is what's happened. Not only that, but under President Biden, the Supreme Court of the United States canceled affirmative action, which basically means there will be no address ever for black grievances, all the wrongs that have been done to us. Forget reparations. Forget reparations. Now, I'm not saying let us not keep trying for reparations. It's never going to happen. They'll go to war before they're going to cough up billions and billions of dollars to pay the African American people back for 250 years of unpaid labor, plus all of the horrible violence and everything else done to us. That's saying don't even come with that. Don't make America great again means black people, you don't have any grievances that we are ever going to recognize. Does that sound familiar? Yes. It should, because in 1857, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled on a case by a man, a slave named Dred Scott, who ran away to freedom and got to a state where the slavery was outlawed, and he thought he was free, but the federal government of the United States had the fugitive slave law that said even if a runaway slave gets to a state where slavery is illegal, he is deeded property and must be returned to his rightful owner. Well, that was just confirmed on November 5th. We're going back to that. And if you don't think that's going to get down to specifics, the state of California, the largest state with over 40 million people, they voted on November 5th to restore the 13th Amendment ban against involuntary servitude. They had canceled it some years back. They said, we will never make prisoners in the state of California correctional system have to do slave labor and work for free, work against their will. They actually had a referendum in California on November 5th, and the people of California voted it back in.
That's sad. That was the 10-minute timer going off too.
All right. Now, in order to prep black people, Dr. Hilberg he ended an 800 and some 70-page book. His book was almost 900 pages. And he ended it by a little chapter of about 12 pages called Implications, as in implications for the future. Does what happened to the European Jews under Nazi Germany have any implication for future countries and future populations of people in the world? And he said that if it were to happen again, that a modern nation, an advanced nation, Germany was one of the world's most technologically advanced nations, military advanced nations, wealthy nations. In a certain sense, it was America. It wasn't quite as developed as America and as big as America, but it was an American state. Mm-hmm. Everything was going fine. Everything was working. They were making money. Everything was going. And Hitler decided that no, we've been cheated, we've been robbed, we've been ripped off, and we've been pushed around. And his plan of attack, among other things, was the Jews are responsible for what happened to Germany, and when we kill all the Jews, our country, we're going to get our country back. Well, we're in America, and since leading up to November 5th, there's been all that talk about we're taking our country back. we're taking our country back. And the Democrats were saying, well, we're going to be the ones standing for democracy. But the Republican side, the MAGA side, was saying, we're going to take our country back. We want to go back to something that was much more better for us as white people and our values and things of this nature. That's what this was all about. Now, here's what Dr. Hilberg had to say regarding if the African American people were to be scheduled, targeted for destruction. One of the most important ingredients would be there would have to be a breakdown of African American group identity, or as he put it in his book, the abolition of group identity by the African American people. Now, let me read this quote to you. This is not his words. He identified the destruction of Black identity, African American people, unity and identity, as a major ingredient towards leading the Black people in America into a death trap. This is my interpretation of what he meant. Today, there is no unified agreement among African American people as to who we are as a people, nor what political goals should be pursued that most effectively will move Blacks from our second-class status in America to what we deserve. We are church people, we are street criminals, we're college educated, we're public school dropouts. We have gone from being enslaved niggers to coloreds, to Negroes, to Afro-Americans, to African Americans, to Blacks, and now to self-proclaimed niggas, Niggaz, and whatever is coming next. We are divided by education, income, social habits, housing locations, felon versus never been arrested, and of course, by the incredible diversity of physical features among all Americans with Black skin. We relish the fact that all Black people are not alike. Oh, we love saying that. All Black people aren't alike. As if that is the ultimate goal. But all Jews, Chinese, Arabs, and Nigerians are not alike either. Yet these and other groups in America can still manifest a unified group identity in the face of white supremacist aggression. They never splinter to the point that they cannot fight racism with a unified ethnic, religious, or racial front. African Americans, on the other hand, are still arguing over what to even call ourselves. This is a destruction of Black identity, and that is why 20% of the Black vote went to Trump. They're entitled. It's America. You can vote for who you want to vote for, but they did not take into consideration what would happen to a lot of other Black people if Trump came back to power. The Latinos, they voted for Trump because they said, yeah, he can kick 1 million people or 2 million or 5 million Latinos out of the country, but that ain't me. And they figure, well, I'm an American citizen, so I won't be put out of the country. Everybody had a reason to say, I'm going with Trump. And nobody was really thinking about when he gets into power and really gets rolling, who are the most likely and most vulnerable victims of what his administration and regime is about to unleash. Now, continuing forward.
That is all for this week, and we'll be back with you in about 2 weeks to continue our conversation with Mr. Walter Vincent Brooks. We'll talk to you then. Have a great night. They Look at Us Differently airs the first and third Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. on KUAW.org. You can also hear it at therightauthority.com, and you can pick it up on YouTube for the video version at KUAW Radio.
We have to talk about the struggle of black people not only